This is Mile High.
We have to do it better in order to move people along.
Up, down, inside out.
If you get your mind right,
it is not. It is a receiver of thought.
His love is my first technique.
It's now time for the show.
Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles, coming from an altitude of 5,280 feet. And thank you again for joining us on the podcast, whether you are listening to it on iTunes or Stitcher or YouTube or one of the many channels or even Facebook. While you're listening to this, if you have not already hit subscribe, certainly hit that right away so you never miss an episode. Secondly, if you have not locked in being at Mile High, it's just around the corner, www.milehighchiro.org, and it's August 16th to 19th. And today we are getting to interview one of our highlighted speakers who I am so excited to have join us at Mile High. He has quite the full schedule that he takes his time out to prioritize Mile High. Means a lot to us and also to all the attendees. Dr. Shawn Dill contributes so much to chiropractic in so many ways. Besides his own ventures and projects, he serves on the Australian Spinal Research Foundation, on their board, who we are highlighting and raising funds for this year. He also serves on the Sherman College of Chiropractic board, as well as the IFCO, three vital organizations, all of which he does not have to do, but he cares about chiropractic that much. On top of that, also working with the Art of the Specific, the Black Diamond Club, as well as the specific centers. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Shawn Dill.
Hey, thanks for having me. Super excited that we were able to, we had a couple technical glitches, but I'm glad that we were able to overcome that. Really excited to be able to share with all of the fans, the followers, and the supporters of this Mile High movement. Now, I don't know my altitude because we just recently moved to just north of Indianapolis, Indiana, but probably somewhere a lot closer to sea level than you.
Probably, but that doesn't, your attitude is still pretty high, which is awesome, which is where I'd like to get started. For someone to have their hands and heart in so many things in chiropractic that you do, you have to have a pretty big motivation for the principle and pretty high level of focus of how vital this is for the future of the planet and humanity. Can you say something about where your motivation comes from to do so much for chiropractic?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have a story where like I was about to die. Both of my daughters, who they're chiropractic children, but they didn't have near-death experiences. This had a pretty regular, what we would call chiropractic life, which I guess would just be a regular life. For me, it's not motivated because like something happened to me. And that's something that I think is kind of unique in chiropractic. Most people get into chiropractic because their life was saved, their child's life was saved, something along those lines. But for me, really, what I just see opportunity. When I first discovered this thing, I didn't discover chiropractic, but when I discovered the thing chiropractic, and I began to read about it, it was really something that was really exciting to me. And I just wanted everybody to just have the opportunity. And I think that's one of the things, too, that's important is that, in this world, we live in an information world, an information society. You can Google WebMD. You can find anything that you want to find on the internet. I mean, original ideas are few and far between. I watch, Shark Tank a lot. You watch that and you realize like there's very few original ideas anymore. But the thing about it for me, the motivation really comes down to choice. I just think that people should be exposed to the possibilities that exist for them and have the opportunity to choose. And I guess more than anything, I mean, we always say don't talk about what you're against. But if you'll just indulge me for a second, what I am against is the dogmatic jamming down people's throats that there is one way to do something. And, like I said, if you begin to just navigate life, watch the internet, watch your social media feed, you begin to really understand that there's no one right way to do anything. I don't care what it is, whatever you're passionate about, whether it's spirituality, every church is a little bit different. Whether it's, maybe it's the culinary arts, there's no one right way to cook a hard-boiled egg even. I mean, do you cook it in the water? Does the water start boiling? Or do you start it from room temp? Do you take it out and put it on ice? Oh, that makes it big. All of these things, right? There's no one right way to do anything. But for me, the main thing is I want people to have a choice, especially when it comes to their health. I just want every person on the planet to be exposed to the opportunity to live a life where their body is expressing health in the way that it was created. And that's it. And if they choose not to do that, great. There's lots of other options out there for them, but I just want them to have that choice. And so every day I wake up and I fight for people to have that right to choose that.
And that's really important. It's really important that people know that there's other options. I do that all the time in my office. I get so frustrated that you see that people are told by a healthcare practitioner that the only thing you can do is cut open your spine and do surgery or whatever it might be. That's an extreme example, but things like that happen every single day, especially relative to people's health. And it does fuel that fire more. Another thing is with all the different things that you have your hands in, I know some people get overwhelmed just running one office. Like that can be a lot. But you run multiple offices as well as seminars and other things. That takes very significant time management skills and focus and other skill sets. How are you so efficient with all these areas and also do that at such a high level?
Well, right now it's funny in Black Diamond Club, this particular week, we're having a focus on situations because I put out a podcast to the members of the group this week that spoke about situations. And the reason why I did that was because I was running into a lot of people that were exactly in the boat that you just described, Andy, that they would tell me, like, I have a big vision. I want to put on a seminar. I want to open another office. I want to bring on another associate. I want to, acquire another office space. I want to serve, but I just don't have the time. Like I was going through that with a lot of different people that I work with. And I was like, well, where does the time go? Like what exactly, because you get 24 hours. Like what exactly do you do with the time? And I was hearing them say, I'm super disciplined with my time. And I was like, okay, well, and I do this exercise and I'll share it with your listeners as well. When I'm working with a client that brings up time at all, I have them at the end of the day, take about 5 or 10 minutes and just write down everything they did that day. In some cases, I'll just have them send it to me. So it's a legitimate exercise. Like I want to know everything you did today. And then I also want to know of the things that you did, how many of them were high level, high paying priority tasks, and how many of them were you doing things that probably could have been delegated. I call them maybe $15 or $20 an hour tasks. And what I realized through that is I had a couple of conversations with people that said, what I realized is that I spend a lot of my time putting out fires. And I was like, well, you know what? Listen, that's situational, right? So like the sink was leaking. Well, that's a situation. We ran out of ink in the printers. Well, that's a situation. The staff person came 10 minutes late and I had to deal with that. Well, that's a situation. And here's one of the things I heard this wonderful line. And the line is that systems solve situations. And so everywhere where we're finding ourselves in situations, we can implement systems so that we don't find ourselves in that situation again. And here's the thing is if you don't, you're going to be right back in that same situation, maybe of a greater or lesser magnitude, but a very similar situation in short order because you haven't implemented systems. And then one other thing real quick on that is that I noticed that when we write down everything that we do in a day, it's hard to do that sort of objectively. You can see your emotion bleed through where you would say something like, well, I had to fix the sink, right? There's a lot of people that are like, well, you could say you get to. Right. But my thing about it is that when we're navigating our days, our business, when we're navigating our lives, you know what? It's easy. It's easy for people to write when there's a problem. Look at your social media feed right now. And there's all kinds of people identifying the when. Like, oh, I was just telling Lacey this morning, they're doing some construction on a road outside our home. And I was looking on social media and everybody was crying like, oh, they're doing this construction and they've got it down to one lane and they're screwing it up. And I said, listen, it looks an awful lot like this kind of stuff I hear in our profession and other circles, things directed at me or other people. It's the same thing. And people are experts at saying when there's a problem. But the truly successful people in the world, they're not worried about when, they're worried about why. And so, you know, if you want to be able to do a lot of things, whenever you find yourself in a situation, you must learn to not become a judge of the situation, but a witness to it. It's just merely something that is happening and you are witnessing the occurrence. And as an objective witness, you have the ability to create systems around that so that that situation does not happen again. Listen, the road construction very well may be the creation of a system to address a situation, which for our healthcare, listeners, a symptom, right? A situation is nothing but a symptom, and then a system is going to the root cause so that we don't find ourselves back there. And that road construction could be addressing the cause, because it might have been a problem that maybe 1, 2, or 5 years from now was going to manifest itself in a very big way. And so they're attempting to address that now. And if we say, well, yes, it may be inconvenient, I'm just a witness to it. I'm not judging it. I'm not worried about whose fault it is, who decided to do the construction in the middle of the summer. I'm just a witness to it. And as such, it allows me to navigate that and see that if this gets solved, listen, in a couple of months or maybe less time, this will be a much better way to transit. It won't be as blocked up, and the situation will have been resolved.
You know, as you shared that, it made me think of the next question, which was really related to that, with all the different situation things that we can get distracted with and can take our attention, especially that comment of the $15 or $20 an hour jobs. I think about that often is like, well, am I, my hour may be worth $1,000, and am I paying my $1,000 to get this email sent, right? Or something like that. You introduced me to someone, which I'm very grateful that you introduced me to, Ryan Ryder, a good friend of yours, friend of mine. And Ryan Ryder, I heard him say something. I said, how do you do all of this? And he said, a key is 2 things. One, just because there's a lot to be done doesn't mean that you have to be the one that does it. And then number 2 is that you have to stay in that visionary position. I would imagine with you juggling that there's a lot of staying in that visionary position.
Well, you know what? I'll give a book recommendation here. I'm not a big book guy, and so when I give a book recommendation, it's important, right? Because I'm not the guy that's like every week I've got another book. I do call myself an information curator. I like to expose myself to a lot of information, but for me to dive down and really say, listen, at the end of the day, the overall complete work, this is good. Well, it's going to be 2 books, 2-part series. Les McEwen, and I don't know if in the notes we can maybe put a link here or Les, but he has a book called Predictable Success. I mean, I don't hear of entrepreneurs talking about this book. It's not like mainstream and everybody. It's not E-Myth or one of those. Predictable Success was a book for me that really changed the way that I looked at things. And then the second part of that book is The Synergist. And what Les did is he looked at a lot of businesses. He was an accountant, and he noticed that he worked with a lot of businesses that did really well, and he worked with a lot of businesses that ultimately ended up closing their doors. And he wanted to know why. And so he went on this journey, and he kind of documents that out through Predictable Success, and he found that there were some trends. One of the trends is that most successful businesses launch with 2 key players. It could be 2 people, partners, but it could be the ability of one person to play both roles. And those things are visionary and operator. Now, you had said, you have to stay in the visionary role. And I would agree with that because that's the driver. However, I will say that there are plenty of people that are visionaries and have no operators. And so then nothing happens. It's just like a big idea and there's no forward movement. These are the people that post like, I have the plan. Oh, you have the plan, but nothing's ever gotten done because there's no operation to the actual plan. You need operators. Now here, though, is the point of discussion. We could have done a podcast just on this, is that inherently visionaries and operators don't really get along. And that's something that is really, it baffles me that people in business who are successful cannot take a moment to actually realize this. That would avoid a lot of conflict, right? Because visionaries, they have a big vision and they kind of operate and navigate through the world with no rules. They're typically the boss, right? I said we had some technical glitches, so for me, my day to day, I'm doing this, then I have another appointment with some social media guys at the top of the hour. But really what's in my head is that I have a 2:30 tea time, right? So I'm trying to make sure that I hit that. Now, as an operator though, that's not how things roll. As a visionary, that's how my day looks. An operator, they follow certain rules. However, they don't like rules for themselves. So I'm sure, Danny, you probably have some really great operators to pull off things like Mile High. But here's the trick. Really strong operators, they get stuff done, but they have their own way of getting things done. Now, the visionary doesn't really care because the visionary is like, as long as it gets done. But at times, there enters in a certain degree of resentment because the visionary loves rules for everybody else. Right? There's got to be rules because that's what creates order in the business, but the visionary doesn't like to follow the rules. The operator, they also appreciate rules for everybody else. And as long as the visionary will give the operator the leeway to do it how they want, then everything gets done, and that's the start of a successful enterprise. The problem arises because eventually the enterprise grows so big that we cannot continue to operate in this ruleless, chaotic environment. And so these two individuals, or maybe the two personalities, they decide to bring in a third person or a third personality into the mix, and that's the processor. The processor comes in and they create all kinds of rules. You start to see things like standard operating procedures for all kinds of things. Here's the problem. Visionaries don't like processes and operators don't like processes, and we're headed, if we're not careful, to on a collision course to destruction. So many businesses take off and they hit sort of a plateau and then they attempt to process and they crash. Or sometimes they hit that plateau and they attempt to process, and what happens is the visionary and the operator kick the processor out. They retreat back to safety. That's where actually, honestly, the majority of the people, and you and I run in very similar circles. So Danny, you and I know a lot of people who hit that ceiling. They decided they needed to be processed and they didn't like being processed, so they retreated back. They operate here and it's quite successful, but they can't push through. And then the last group are those that actually, the visionary actually decides that they need to embrace the operator and the processor. And this then is the genesis of the second book, The Synergist. The Synergist begins to understand that rather than operating your life in 100% visionary role, that you must be able to adapt, chiropractic word, and be visionary, operator, and processor simultaneously, and hopefully in a balance where you are now symbiotic with those roles in your business, and that's what allows you to grow. Otherwise, if you just stay 100% visionary all the time, you'll probably reach a certain plateau, a certain ceiling, and you'll never be able to get past that because inherently you don't like processes. You don't like rules. You don't like that type of order. You may be disciplined, but you don't like for people to hold you to a way that you have to do things. And that's what makes working with visionaries so difficult, right? If you're sitting on a board and you have a lot of visionaries, that's the challenge because they don't like rules. And so they're just like, we're operating on my rules. And then you realize like, hey, we can't always do that if we want to have growth. And so I think that's, a little bit of an advanced way to look at it. Please check out Predictable Success. Please check out The Synergist. For me, very transformational books that really shape the way that any business that I'm involved in, the way that business gets developed. We do that with those things in mind.
Well, and for people that follow up on what you just said, that's going to be huge for them. So the action takers will hear that, write it down, not when you're driving and listening to this, but write it down and follow up. And we will definitely put it in the liner notes. And speaking of that, as I said, grateful for that introduction of relationship you built. when you come to Mile High, one of the things you're doing is, in addition to speaking on the main stage, August 16th to 19th, you're also doing a breakout session. And you're doing it, if I remember the title correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was Relationship Capital. Tell me a little bit about that topic, or tell all our listeners about that and what you mean by that.
Yeah, so currently my mentor is Jay Abraham, and I've been working with him for just over a year. And one of his, I'd say there's several foundational building blocks. One of them is preeminence. And we're really diving in deep, doing some work with him on working on some preeminent strategies for healthcare providers. Maybe at some point, if I don't botch it up in 2018, we're back in 2019, we could maybe be talking about that. Preeminence, just real quick as an aside, is something that has really caught my eye, because we live in a world, during social media and the marketing trends, where you really need to stand out, because listen, what stands out gets remembered. But then in the healthcare world, and I'm not talking just chiropractors, I mean in healthcare in general, it's tough. A lot of people have some stories that they've told themselves that it's not cool to stand out, because if I stand out, if I say that, hey, Tats is the best, is that in some way insinuating that network is not? If I say my office is the best, is that saying that my colleagues are second rate? Or if I'm not even saying the best, if I say that, we're really good. If I'm getting a lot of positive reviews, a lot of people think that, they feel they have like a shame or a guilt around that. And so we're going to discuss some ways that you can ethically, legally be preeminent in the space of healthcare, and especially for younger docs. It's easy if you're an older doc and you're like, I'm already preeminent. People know who I am. Great. But what about a younger doc, and how do you establish preeminence? Now, a second thing that he talks about is relational capital. And, a year ago or so ago, Lacey and I did a breakout on money matters and relationships and the way that we view money. Well, this year we want to break it down, and we want to talk relationships, and relationships start, home with you, and then those concentric circles out. So obviously you, and then your significant other, your family, we would have colleagues, we would have your customers or your clients or your patients, we would have your prospects, we would have the suspects, people that you don't even know in your community. We would have, this relationship that you're creating and engaging from the center point, which is you, outward. And we're going to talk about the keys to building those strong relationships. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how those relationships can affect. They're intertwined. And I'm not talking about on sort of a higher plane level. We're going to talk nuts and bolts level about how those relationships intertwine and can affect your business. A lot of people are like, well, I'm not getting very many referrals. Can you teach me how to get referrals? Well, the starting point for referrals is relationship. If you're not in good relationship with those people who you expect to refer to you, then of course they're not going to refer. It doesn't matter what, scripting or tricks or gadgets that we give you, they're not going to refer to you because you're not in relationship. And so we're going to really break down the bigness of relationship, how to create strong relationship, how to maintain strong relationship. And listen, I think because it is Mile High, that's all fine and good. But lastly, how to leverage those relationships in order to actually build your practice, to spread the word and build your vision, throughout your community. And if your vision is bigger, beyond the community, out into the world.
And we tell people that all the time, that, marketing is building relationships, is building community and connection. And if you don't do that part, all the slick whatever is not going to be anywhere near as effective. Now, with that, you've been to Mile High 2 or 3 years now. I'm actually not sure, but a number of years now. Why do you love being at Mile High?
Well, listen, there's just a couple of programs that get slotted in as just, foundational programs, and Mile High is one of those. I have a vision for being able to bring this message outside of chiropractic, but inside of chiropractic, you have, Mile High, and for me, Berkshire Philosophy Event, as two of sort of the big cornerstones there. The reason why is because of what the seminar stands for, what the event stands for, and also what the event organizer stands for. Now, there's a little business lesson in there, because I believe that people don't really do business with you because of your why. But I don't know why Danny puts on Mile High. That wasn't a condition. I mean, I could guess, but it's not like I said, well, why are you doing this? But I do know what the Knowles family stands for. And beyond that, I know what the event stands for. And so, you know, when we're talking about putting in your investment of time and finances and support and you have to land it in places that are going to stand for the things that you're in alignment with, Mile High is right there. Look at all of the work that has been done to, you know, champion and position the principle of chiropractic. I mean, of course, it's being done in Colorado. That's where the Knowles live. That's where the event is. But that work extends beyond Colorado. But if you were just to look at Colorado, the amount of impact that the family and the event has had on the profession is enormous. I mean, I can't even imagine what things would look like in Colorado if it was not for what the Knowles and, you know, that the Mile High tribe contribute to standing the ground and trying to protect chiropractic there. But listen, we live in an electronic world, and this influence then bleeds out beyond Colorado. And so it doesn't matter where you are on the planet. If you stand for protecting and preserving chiropractic in its essence, then you need to be supporting things like Mile High. And here's the thing, you know, earlier, Danny, you asked me, like, you know, what, you know, doing all of these things, there's one key element. We can't do anything. We can't do anything in this world without commodity. Now, I would say money, but that's not true, because we could trade a lot of other things. We could trade relational capital. We could trade other, you know, things that but those are all still commodity. We need commodity. But I believe that the way that you get commodity is that you put in, it's a fair exchange. We need to be in fair exchange. And so when I'm putting in, when I'm supporting, when I'm going out and giving of my time and putting my support into Mile High, I get back. And I just want to tell you, listen, if you're not getting back, so if you're not saying, if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm not blessed, then I want to encourage you to begin to think about, where are you placing your support? It's just an ROI. It's an ROI world. You place your support, you place it correctly, you invest wisely, you get a massive return. And so I'll tell you the truth. The reality is, not because financial gain, but because of just life abundance gain, Mile High pays big dividends for me. I love the people. I love the relationships. I love the camaraderie. I love the support. And that goes beyond just that weekend, right? You know, I'm here, we're months away, but I see Danny all the time. Rochelle, connection with their children, other people that I've met through the network community. Listen, I practice upper cervical. The majority of the clients that I consult with practice network. And the reason why is because of the connection through Mile High. And it's just creating a family, and that just continues to bless me abundantly, regardless of whether I was speaking or not. And the same thing goes for Berkshires. You know, there's so many of these conferences where the speaker goes because they're speaking. Mile High is a conference that I go to because I'm going to the conference, right? Because it's the fellowship, it's what it represents, it's what it stands for, and I stand for the same things. If you are listening to this, and we don't have to say this is what we stand for, but if you're saying, wow, I kind of stand for that too, well, then I encourage you to get registered for Mile High. It just makes sense.
You know, one, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. And we always love having you and Lacey there, because we get the connection with you and the time with you. And I really appreciate that you said that part of it, because I love the speakers and I love the exhibitors. And I think we do a great job with all of that. And the speakers always bring their A game, etc. But I really love what you said, which I love the community. I love the connection with all the people that attend and the conversations I have with them in the hallway and in the restaurant and in the bar. That community that's developed, that are people that have the same, you know, vision and commitment to the principle, is what makes it the unique synergistic event that it is. So I appreciate that you noticed that same thing. So thank you for taking your time to join us on the podcast. Again, whether you're listening to this on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, whatever it is, make sure you hit subscribe so you do not miss an episode. And absolutely click register at www.milehighchiro.org. We look forward to seeing you rise up August 16th to 19th. It's going to be the best year yet, most highly attended year yet, and the best camaraderie yet. So we look forward to seeing you there, Dr. Shawn Dill, and also love and hugs to your wife, Dr. Lacey Book. We look forward to seeing her there, as well as all of the communities that we share connection with. Thank you so much. Like our page on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Mile High Chiro.